Okay, good afternoon. This is your lesson 7. So, natapos na natin yung lesson 1 to 5. And your lesson 6 will be your prelim exam. So, kapag nakapagpas na kayo ng requirements ninyo for lesson 1 to 5, pwede na kayong mag-prelim exam. And for your lesson 7 to 11, ayan, ito yung midterm lesson natin. Now, sa previous lesson natin, dun sa lesson 5, we discussed about the classifications of business. So, what are those 3 classifications of business? We have service business, merchandising business, and manufacturing business. We discussed also the accounting principles and concepts. So, what are the accounting principles and concepts? We have going concern, materiality concept. Yun yung mga examples na-discuss natin about principles and accounting and the concepts of accounting. Now, let's go to your lesson 7, which is the types of major accounts. So, at the end of the video, you should be able to know the basic types of accounts, its elements, and their classifications. Familiarize the chart of accounts for service and merchandising business. Number 3 is discuss the 5 major accounts. So, ano ba yung mga major accounts natin? So, let's isa-isahin natin. Now, there are 5 major or basic types of accounts as components in the financial statement. So, number 1, we have the assets account. So, ano bang sinasabi ni assets? Assets are defined as tangible and intangible items. Ayan. At yung mga ari-arian ni business, maybe objects or entities that the company owns and have an economic value. So these assets are also the resources of the company that bring in revenues or income for the business. So ito yung mga assets na ginagamit para mag-create or makapagbigay yung business ng profit or income. Ayan. Assets can be used to settle obligations, pambayad ng utang, produce goods and services for sale. Ayan. Through these assets, pwede kang makapag-produce ng goods or services that is available for sale. Like for example, you have an assets like cash. Ayan. Bibili ka ng for example, RTWs na pwede mo ding ibenta sa market or sa merkado. Next is barter or exchange with another form of assets. Ang assets daw pwede mo siyang ipalit sa another form of asset. Like for example, yung motor mo, pwede na ginagamit mo for business, pwede mo siyang ipalit ng tricycle. Yan, pwede yan, another form of asset. Pay off capital investment in the form of drawings. So, those assets can be used to, letter A, B, C, and D. Now, assets are classified as, ano ba yung classifications ng assets? Number 1, we have current assets. Ano ba yung mga current assets? Sabi dito, items that are completely consumed, sold, or converted into cash within 1 year or 12 months. So, kapag current assets yan, pwede mo siyang i-convert within 1 year or 12 months. Ano yung mga examples ng current assets? We have here cash and its equivalent. Cash and cash equivalents. Ayan. Yung perang nasa bulsa mo or perang nasa iyo or yung mga checking nasa iyo. Accounts receivable. So, yung mga pautang mo. Notes receivable. Ito yung mga pautang mo din yan. Merchandise inventory, supplies inventory, and prepaid expenses. And we have also the non-current assets. Mamaya, iisa-isayin natin yan kung ano yung mga notes payable, notes receivable, accounts receivable, merchandise inventory, supplies inventory. Mamaya, isa-isayin natin yan. Now, let's go to the non-current assets. Are tangible or intangible? Ayan. Intangible assets with a lifespan of more than 1 year and usually longer, which typically not very liquid. So, for example, more than 1 year siya. Basta non-current assets, more than 1 year. It is convertible beyond 1 year. So, ano ba yung mga examples ng non-current assets natin? So, nandito yung mga land, building, vehicles, office and computer equipment, furniture and fixtures. Ayan. And we have also the tangible assets are those assets with physical forms. Ayan, such as land, buildings, vehicles, equipment, and inventory. Pag sinabi nating tangible, ito yung nahahawakan natin. So, for example, let's have cash. So, this is the most liquid in a business organization. Kasi ito yung na-access mo immediately. So, this may represent cash on hand, cash in bank, petty cash fund, and revolving funds. So, short-term marketable securities or instruments are also classified as cash. So, cash on hand, yung nasa iyo, cash in bank, yung pera mo sa bangko, petty cash fund, para din yan para din yung nasa iyo na pera, pero yung mga expenses mo doon, for example, may 30,000 ka, kailangan mo siyang i-liquidate, kailangan mong isulat yung mga expenses mo para kapag naubos na yung petty cash fund mo, pwede mo siyang lagyan ulit, ay i-replenish yung mga resibo na nagasto mo. Pwede ka ring magkaroon, pag naubos mo yung 30,000, pwede ka ding magkaroon ulit ng 30,000 provided na i-replenish mo yung mga resibo. So, ganun yung petty cash fund. Next is the merchandise inventory. So, ano itong merchandise inventory na sinasabi? So, these are purchases of various goods or products intended for sale. So, ito yung mga inventories na hindi mo pa nabenta kapag at the end of the month or at the end of the year. So, for example, yung mga pag merchandise business yan, yung mga nagbabay and sell, yung mga nasa market, yung mga nagtitinda ng RTWs, yung mga grocery store natin, ayan, yung Golden AG, so that is example of yung mga natirang, yan yung tawag kung bakit sila nagbibilang, kung at the end of the month, bibilangan nila, ilan ba yung natirang pencil, magkano ba yung nabenta namin. So, nag-i-inventory sila. And so with the supplies inventory. So, these are purchases of various supplies intended for office. So, for example, bumili yung isang office ng 10 reams of bond paper, and then at the end of the month, 3 na lang yung natira. So, iyan yung i-declare mo as supplies inventory na natira at the end of the month. So, once the supplies are put into use for the businesses are even classified as, so, yung 7 na nagamit mo na reams, maka-classify na siya as supplies expense. Yung natira na 3 reams, ilalagay mo siya sa supplies inventory. Ayan. And we have also sa tangible assets, land, building, equipment, furniture, and vehicles. Ito yung mga long-term resources natin. Ito yung mga long-term assets natin of the business that serve as support to the day-to-day activities of the business. Ayan. Yan yung mga ginagamit natin to operate the business, yung mga yan, to serve as support to the day-to-day activities of the business. Siyempre, kailangan din natin ng equipment, vehicles, para kapag may business ka, and then yung product mo, kailangan mong i-deliver, may magagamit ka, di ba? So, those are your tangible assets. When we say intangible assets, ito yung hindi mo nahahawakan. So, we have here accounts receivable. So, sabi natin kanina, ito yung pautang mo. So, these amounts due from customers who have purchase goods or services from the seller through sales invoices. So, ito yung nagkabagbenta ka pero inutang. Nag-render ka ng service pero inutang. So, take note of that, accounts receivable. So, this is common paired with the allowance for doubtful accounts. So, when we say allowance for doubtful accounts kasi, ito na yung bad debts mo na pinautang mo pero hindi mo na siya masisingil. Ayan. The combined balances in the accounts receivable and allowance accounts represents the net carrying value of accounts receivable. So, for example, sa accounts receivable mo, 20,000, and then nag-declare ka na ng allowance for doubtful accounts, 1,000. So, ang net carrying value of your accounts receivable is only 19,000. Kasi nag-declare ka na yung 1,000, hindi mo na siya masisingil. So, did you get what I mean? So, next is the notes receivable. So, ano naman tong notes receivable na to? Ayan, this account represents indebtedness of a customer who purchases goods or services from a seller by way of a promissory note. Ayan. From the word notes receivable, basta nakakita ka na ng word na promissory note, notes receivable na yon. Pag nakita mo na, nabasa mo na yung transaction, dun sa transaction, it is a promissory note, ilagay mo siya na notes receivable. Pag sinabi na yung pinautangan mo, nagbigay ng promissory note sa'yo, or dun sa may-ari ng business, ilagay mo siya na notes receivable. Okay? Now, let's go to prepaid expenses. Bakit tinawag na prepaid? Ang prepaid expenses ay nasa asset. Prepaid expenses. From the word expenses, dapat sana expenses yan. Pero hindi, di ba? Nasa asset siya. Dun kasi, dito kasi binabayaran natin in advance yung expenses natin. Ano ba yung pwede nating advance na binabayad? Yung rent expense natin. Pwede ka nang, since may collection ka naman, pwede mo nang bayaran in advance yung rent mo sa building kung nagre-renta ka. Diba? Yung advertising expense or advertising, yes, pwede mo na siyang bayaran in advance. Kaya siya, kabilang pa din siya sa asset kasi prepaid, hindi mo pa siya nagamit. So, these are future expenses paid in advance, and the amount that has not yet expired are reported in the company's balance sheet as an asset. Kasi, hindi mo pa siya na-consume. Ayan. Ano ba yung mga examples natin kanina? Prepaid advertising, prepaid insurance, prepaid rent, prepaid taxes. Yun yung mga pwede nating bayaran in advance. Ayan. Next is, we have also the goodwill. Ayan. Goodwill is an intangible asset that accounts for the excess purchase price of another company. Items included in goodwill are proprietary or intellectual property and brand recognitions which are not easily quantifiable. So, ayan. Intangible assets ang goodwill. Kasi ito yung accounts na in excess in your purchase price of another company. Purchase ka ng ibang company. And also, we have copyrights. That is considered also your intangible asset. Ayan, copyright is a collection of rights that automatically vest to someone who creates, who creates an original work or authorship. Like kung ikaw yung nag-compose ng song, nung music na yon, so that is considered gumawa ng modules. Ayan. Yan yung mga iniwasan natin, copyrights, kina-copy-paste copy-paste lang. Ayan. So, hindi yan pwede photocopy yung mga libro, hindi yun pwede. Pino-photocopy yung mga modules, you need to buy modules. Hindi lang yung pino-photocopy ninyo. Okay, next is the patent. So, a patent is the granting of a property right, ayan, by a sovereign authority to an inventor. So, kapag nag-invent ka, nag-access ka ng, this grant provides the inventor exclusive right to, rights to the patented process. Pag may in-invent ka, kailangan mo siyang i-patent para para hindi kopyahin ng iba yung invention mo. Ayan. Franchises. A franchise is a type of license that a party or yung franchisee natin, nag-acquire siya to allow them to have an access to a business, which is a franchisor, proprietary knowledge, processes, and trademarks in order to allow the party to sell a product or provide a service under business name. Ano ba yung mga examples ng franchise natin dito sa Tabuk? Ayan, Mang Inasal, Jollibee, Red Ribbons, Total Gasoline Station, Petron. So, yun yung mga examples ng franchise natin. Pumili ka ng franchise ni ganito para magamit mo yung pangalan niya. So, those are your classifications of assets. So, we have current assets, non-current assets, And then we have also the tangible assets and intangible assets. Now, let's go to number 2, which is the liabilities. So, ano bang sinasabi dito sa liabilities na to? Liabilities are the debts, yan, or financial obligations of an individual or company to other individuals or companies. So, ito yung utang mo. Utang mo sa isang financial institution, or utang mo sa ibang companies, or utang mo sa individual na tao. So that is your liabilities or utang ng business mo. The settlement of these debts or obligations is true. So paano mo siya ma-settle? So, number 1, payment in the form of cash. Pwede mo siyang bayaran sa cash. Cash. Sa pera na hawak mo, di ba? Payment in the form of any asset other than cash. Ano ba yung any assets other than cash? So, ito yung pwede mo din sang maging offset na lang. Kung may utang siya sa'yo, may utang din siya sa akin, ay may utang ka din sa kanya, then pwede mo siyang i-offset. Pambayad dun sa accounts receivable niya sa'yo. Yes, accounts receivable and accounts payable. Ayan. And kung may ari-arian ka na land, ito na lang kunin mo. Pambayad ko sa utang mo. Ito na lang lupa ko kunin mo. Ito na lang building ko kunin mo, pambayad ko sa utang ko. Pwede ding ito na lang, yung sasakyan ko na lang kunin mo na lang, pambayad sa utang. Ayan. Payment in the form of rendering services. Ayan. Kapag may utang ka sa restaurant, for example, ayan, maging tagahugas ka. Tagahugas dun sa restaurant na yon. Kung hindi mo na mabayaran yung utang mo, pwede maghugas na lang ako ng plato everyday para mabayaran ko yung utang ko. Ayan, pwede yon. Replacement, no, depende sa agreement naman. Replacement by another debt or obligation. So, ito na yung sinasabi ko kanina na pwedeng quits na lang kayo sa utang ninyo sa isa't isa. For example, 20,000 yung utang mo, 20,000 din yung utang niya, yung utang ng business mo sa utang ng business niya, then pwedeng quits na lang. Yan, pwede yon. Conversion of the debt into capital. So, pwede mo siyang i-convert yung utang mo na maging capital. Magiging capital mo siya. The creditor may waive his right to collect the existing obligation. So, those are your liabilities. So, let's go to liabilities. Ano ba yung classifications ng liabilities natin? So, para din siyang sa asset, which is sige, asset, may current asset siya, may non-current asset siya. So, dito sa liabilities naman, current liabilities and non-current liabilities. So, when we say current liabilities, para din tong current assets, that this consists of short-term debts that require payment in 1 year or less. So 1 year mo siya babayaran. Current liabilities. So payment that required within 1 year or less. So kapag current assets, ito yung convertible to cash within 1 year or 1 year or less. Pag current liabilities naman, ito yung utang mo na kailangan mong bayaran within 1 year or less. Okay? So, what are the current assets? I hope that nababasa. But anyway, you have your modules with you. Pwedeng tignan nyo na lang sa modules ninyo. Okay, let's go to accounts payable. So, these are amounts owned by the individual or company to creditors or suppliers for the purchase of goods and services. So, ito na yung pinautang mo. Yan. Pag accounts receivable, pinautang mo. Pag accounts payable, ito yung utang mo. Did you get it? Okay. Ito yung utang mo sa mga suppliers mo kapag may nagsusupply sa'yo para sa business mo. Ito yung mga utang mo sa mga creditors like your banks, financial institutions na pinaputangan mo para makapag-purchase ka ng goods or services para sa business mo. Ayan. Unearned income. So, amount received from the customer in advance, either as deposit or down payment for services that has yet to be performed by the company. So, tinawag nating liabilities ito kasi hindi mo pa na-perform yung task or services pero natanggap mo na yung pera. Ayan. Unearned income. Now, let's go to output VAT payable. So, ito yung mga binabayaran nating taxes. Binabayaran yung tax. This amount represents the tax added to the sale of goods or services being billed to customers, be it cash or an account. So, kung napapansin ninyo, nagbabayad kayo ng value added tax. Ayan, that is your output box payable. Withholding tax payable. So this is a payroll liability in which an amount is withheld as taxes from the salaries of the officers. Ayan, kapag 20,000 mahigit, yung 20,000 something, yan. Basta 20,000 mahigit yung monthly mo, may taxes yan. May babayaran ka na withholding tax ang tawag doon. So, ililes doon sa payroll mo. Next is we have also the SSS payable or the Social Security Services. The amount of the contribution by employees which is deducted from their salaries. So, may deduct din yan sa salaries namin. Sa salaries nyo soon, kung magtatrabaho kayo, may sa private company, may SSS payable kayo. And also, you have also the pag-ibig payable. Yan, may deduct din yan sa salary. Pero, syempre, may counterpart yung company na pagtatrabahuhan nyo soon. We have also the PhilHealth payable. Ayan, yung mga mandatory. Ito yung mga mandatory mandatory payables natin or mandatory contributions natin. Yung SSS, Pag-ibig, PhilHealth. Kung nasa private institution ka or private company. We have also the salaries or wages payable. So these are salaries of employees that are already incurred but only paid on the next payroll cut-off. So ito yung mga pampasweldo mo sa mga empleyado mo. Taxes payable. So these are obligations to the government subsequently paid the following period. So ito, ano ba yung mga taxes natin na binabayaran? So, kapag kukuha ka ng sedula, that is considered as a tax. Accrue, pag kukuha ka ng business permit, may babayaran ka din na tax. Accrued expense payable. So, this amount representing expenses already incurred during the period but not yet paid. Ayan. na-incurred mo na yung expenses mo pero hindi mo pa siya nabayaran. So, that is accrued expense payable. Now, let's go. So, those are your current liabilities. Take note of those. Now, let's go to your non-current liabilities. So, these are long-term debts that will be settled or paid beyond 1 year. So, kung kanina, sa current liabilities natin, it will require the payment within 1 year or less. So, dito sa non-current liabilities, these are long-term debts that will be settled or paid beyond 1 year. So, ano ba yung mga examples ng non-current liabilities natin? So, we have the notes payable. Ayan. This amount is owned by an individual or company to creditors or suppliers for goods or services purchased and is evidenced by a written, ayan, promissory note ka din. To pay the debt in a specified period, normally longer than 1 year. So, kapag gumawa ka din ng promissory note mo, ayan, magiging notes payable na siya. Yung entry na niya sa transaction is notes payable na siya. So, take note of the accounting, those accounting titles. Kasi gagamitin natin yan kapag gagawa na tayo ng papag-aralan na natin yung mga transactions of the business. Okay, next is the loans payable. So, this amount owned by an individual or company to creditors or banks and other financial institutions for amount borrowed, normally for a longer period of time. Ayan. So, that is considered also your non-current liabilities. So, inutang mo sa creditors or bangko. So, kapag nag-loan ka, that is considered as your loan payable. Now, number 3 is your capital or owner's equity. So, equity represents the value of assets after deducting the total liabilities from the total assets mo. So, kapag dineduct mo yung total liabilities from your total assets, that is considered your capital or owner's equity. So, this is also called the residual value or interest of the owner from the business. Yan. Sa capital, makikita natin dito yung initial investment, additional investment, yung owner's drawing, net income, net loss. So, we will be dealing with those one under the capital or owner's equity. So, these are contributions of the owner to the business. So, pwede siyang cash, pwedeng non-cash assets like equipment, mag-i-invest ka ng equipment, vehicles, furnitures. So, those are your capital or owner's equity. So, hindi lang yung pagka sinabi natin capital, it is in the form of cash only. No. It may be in the form of non-current assets like building, land, equipment, furniture. Nag-invest ka ng equipment, nag-invest ka ng building para sa business, that it will be fall in your capital account. Ayan, capital or owner's equity account. Do you understand? Okay. Now, let's go to the number 4, revenues or income. So, ito na yung sinasabi ko kanina. The income or revenue account comprises the actual money earned over a period of time from a job, sale of goods, or products or services, either in cash or on account. So kapag nakapagbenta ka ng products or services, and then nagkaroon ka ng income. Nabenta mo isang ballpen, pinambili mo dyan 10 pesos. Binenta mo siya ng 12, nagkaroon ka ng 2 pesos na income or tubo. Ayan. What are the examples of revenues or income? Okay, number 1 is we have the revenue or income generated. Ayan, from the sale of commodity or rendering of services. Kapag nasabi ko nga kanina, kapag nakabenta ka or kapag you rendered services to the customer, nagkaroon ka ng income mo yun, syempre. Income of the business. Next is the interest received on a bank deposit. Ayan, kapag may pera ka doon, yung 1 million for example, at the end of the month, may nag-update ka ng passbook mo, nakita mo doon, may nadagdag na 100 pesos. So that is your interest received on a bank deposit. So that is considered an interest income. Gain on a sale of assets. So nakapagbenta ka ng lupa mo. Siyempre, pinatungan mo siya. That is your revenue or income. Rental received on a lease of property. Nagpa-rent ka. That is considered your income or revenue. Professional fees earned. Kapag if you're a lawyer, doctor, teacher, that is yung may sweldo ka, that is your income. Siyempre, kaya ka nagtatrabaho para magkaroon ng pera, panggasto sa araw-araw, di ba? Okay, those are your revenues or income. Now, let's go to your expenses. So, ano bang sinasabi na expenses? An expense is a cost, incurred as part of a company's operating activities during a specified accounting period, which are necessarily in the conduct of the business. So, from the word expenses, ito yung expenses mo in your daily activities, in your day-to-day activities of the business. So, ito yung mga utilities expense, advertising expense, rent expense. So, those are. What are the examples of expenses? The cost of goods sold. So, yung pinag-purchase mo ng goods na ibebenta mo. Commissions earned by the sales employee. Siyempre, kapag nakabenta naman yung empleyado mo ng sasakyan, ayan, may commission siya, siyempre. Rent for the office space. So, ito yung sinasabi ko kanina na rent expense. Advertising that took place. Ito yung advertising expense. Nagpa-advertise ka sa radyo or sa TV para makilala yung business mo. Ayan, syempre, expenses mo yun. The cost of the electricity use. Ayan, light and water or electricity or utilities expense. Yung tawag doon. Ano pa? Wages and salaries that were incurred. So, nagpasahod ka, that is considered as your expenses. Depreciation expenses for the amortization of fixed assets. Depreciation. Siyempre, nagde-depreciate yung mga equipment na ginagamit mo. Habang ginagamit mo siya, bumababa yung value. Unlike sa land na habang tumatagal, nag-a-appreciate yung value niya, tumataas. Unlike sa equipment na kapag ginamit mo na siya within 1 year or 2 years, may depreciation expense ka na dyan. And lastly, we have losses. Ayan. Siyempre, expenses mo yun kung may loss ka. Diba? Net loss. Ayan. That will be considered as your expenses. Now, let's go to your charts of accounts. So, ano ba ang sinasabi dito sa chart of accounts? So, a chart of accounts is a created list of the accounts used by the organization to define each class of items for which the money or the equivalent is spent or received. So, it is used to organize. Ayan, pag charts of accounts, it is used to organize the finances of the entity and to segregate. Ayan, segregate natin yung assets, liabilities, capital, revenue, and expenses or expenditures in order to give interest parties a better understanding of the financial activities of the business. So, kapag gagawa ka ng financial statements mo, dapat may charts of accounts ka as a basis. Bakit kailangan na ganun? Para madaling maintindihan yung kung sino yung interesado sa financial statement mo. So, yun yung silbi ng chart of accounts ninyo. So, accountants and bookkeepers, yan, will refer to the chart of accounts list as reference for all the transactions that they will record in the books of accounts as a form of classification. So, dito sila magbabase as a reference. Ayan, may numbers kasi yung chart of accounts na yan. Makikita natin yan mamaya as we go along with our discussion. So, gagamitin nila yung reference number para i-classify kung ano yung accounts na yon or kung ano yung account title na yon. So, ano ba yung sinasabi nating account in accounting? What is an account in accounting? So, it is a record in the general ledger that is used to collect and store debit and credit amounts from transactions. To summarize the same transactions into one specific account, yan is assigned to it. The accounts used in accounting are commonly and generally accepted in the accounting practice. So, ito yung makikita natin sa general ledger and general journal yung paano natin i-debit, yung credit, ayan, amounts from the transactions. So, that is account in the accounting, or sinatawag natin account title. Ayan. Now, let's go to the chart of accounts. Tingnan natin dito. So, hindi ko na nilagay sa presentation kasi marami. So, tignan na lang natin dito sa sa module natin. Okay, lesson 7. Ano ba yung mga numbers na gagamitin natin? So, ito yun. Ito. Charts of account. Ayan. Dito yan. yung account number. So, dito tayo magbe-base. Pag sinabi natin cash on hand, cash in bank, or cash on hand, 100-01 ang gagamitin natin na ilalagay natin sa reference or post-reference soon. Papag-aralan natin yan as we go along with our discussion. Lesson 10 or 11, I think, yung gagamitin natin to. So, take note of this chart of accounts kasi gagamitin natin kapag gagawa na tayo ng general journal. Ayan, general journal. So, kapag accounts receivable, ang account number niya is 103 and also the allowance for doubtful accounts, 101. Ayan. Notes payable. So, ito yung charts of accounts natin, ha. For the non-current assets, we have 10101. So, office equipment, accumulated depreciation, service equipment. So, yan. 10102. Ayan. Ito yung gagamitin natin na account number at ilalagay natin sa post reference doon sa general ledger and sa general journal natin na gagawin soon. Okay? So, take note of those chart of accounts. Current liabilities, baka magtaka kayo kung naglalagay tayo ng post-reference doon. Saan nyo kinuha yung mga number na yun? So, dito na yan. Sinasabi ko na dito tayo magbe-base sa chart of account. May account number. So, dito yung account number niya. Non-current liabilities, ayan. Capital accounts, revenue income accounts. Ito yung mga expenses accounts natin. So, yan. So, that is your chart of accounts. Now, let's go to your requirements. Ayan. So, ano ba yung activity 1 ninyo? For lesson 7. So, identify the following by checking. Check nyo lang pala eh. The appropriate column, whether asset, liability, capital, revenue, or expense account. So, madali lang to. Kapag binasa nyo yung module nyo, nandyan lang yan. Capital, saan mo i-check? Obvious naman. Service revenue, obvious din. Nagkikita din, di ba? So, i-memorize nyo itong mga accounts na to. Kung saan siya mafufall, asset ba to, liability ba to, capital ba to, revenue ba to, expense ba to. Yun yung mga tanong na dapat nyong sagutin kasi gagamitin natin yan sa susunod na discussions natin o sa susunod na lessons natin. Now, let's go to your activity 2. So, ano yung sinasabi dito sa activity 2? Check in the space. Check nyo na naman. Check in the space provided whether the asset listed below is tangible or intangible. So, check nyo lang to. Tangible ba siya? Accounts receivable, tangible ba? Nakahawakan mo ba? O hindi? Ayan. Sa activity 3, state whether each of the following is an asset, liability, or capital. So, i-state nyo lang naman kung, asset ba to? Accrued expense payable. Saan siya magpo-fall? Prepaid insurance. Parang kulang to. Dapat may revenue siya. So, i-check nyo na lang. Expense. May expense din to. Expense. Revenue. May revenue din. So, paki-check na lang kung gumagawa kayo ng kung sasagutan nyo itong lesson 7, pag-check na lang yung instruction, okay? And also we have the activity 4. Indicate the following are current, kung current asset ba siya, non-current assets, current liabilities, or non-current liabilities. Ayan. So, identify nyo lang pala. So, ito, sabi ko nga kanina, i-memorize nyo yung charts of accounts. Or, yun din natin memorize, i-familiarize nyo lang yung mga charts of accounts o yung mga accounts natin, yung mga numbers ng accounts number nila. Yan, familiarize lang naman. Okay? If you have any questions or queries regarding the past lessons or yung ngayong lesson na to, mag-message lang kayo sa akin, sa GC natin, or alam nyo naman yung account ko sa Messenger, then i-message nyo ako sa Messenger. Okay? Huwag kayong mahiya. Magtanong lang kayo. Okay? Okay, that ends our lecture for today. And I hope that you understand our topic today. Okay, goodbye. Have a good day.